Hey guys, welcome to a very special episode of Initial Assessment. And this is a book that was given to me by one of the guys that works at my local comic shop. He wrote it, penciled it, inked it, and this is called The Story of Creation, and it's the black and white edition. And the gentleman's name is Jake Bostain, so go make sure that you follow him on Instagram. And it says all stories and characters represented in this book are copyrighted 2022 by Jacob Bostain, and all rights reserved. On the back of the cover, it says, how did the universe begin? Who created it? Why was it created? What was life like in the very beginning? And these are the questions that the prophet answers as he tells the story of creation in this book. Follow the prophet as he tells many tales of good, evil, and that in between, tales of strength and perseverance, tales of love and passion, tales of betrayal and destruction. This is the story of creation. So, this is not the biblical story of creation. This is not that book. It's not an illustrated copy of Genesis. Instead, it tells the story of Sama, who he's almost like a recorder. But before we get into this, it talks about in honor of Ed Piskor. And I've already done a video about what happened with Ed a couple of years ago. Actually, last year. But it shows that Jacob wrote and penciled and inked this book in order to answer some questions that he had about life, which is very, very interesting to me. It's a good way of catharsis. It's a good way to get out things that you don't understand, things that you need clarification on. Creating things sometimes helps us see those answers. Writing a book, writing a short story, penciling a page, inking a page, those sort of things, they create something out of nothing. And sometimes they can answer those questions in a way that verbiage from someone else or even a long conversation with someone else may not give you the same closure and the same sense of understanding. So to see that Ed actually helped him get sober, helped him, get a solid full-time job. It says at that time he was 122 days sober. So there's a lot of struggle that comic creators go through that people don't see. They think that everything is fine and life doesn't affect these people, and they don't get sick, and they don't take holidays, and they don't have family that loves them. Sometimes people get so caught up in, why didn't so-and-so pencil the 72nd issue of Amazing Spider-Man? That somebody might be me sometimes even. But seriously, sometimes we get so hung up on these creators that we forget that they're human. We forget that sometimes they need an issue off. Sometimes they need that time so that they can go and spend with their family, spend with their loved ones. And so to see that this book came out of the horrible tragedy of Ed Piskor, that gives me some hope in humanity and in people in general. But anyway, to get back to this, we're going to talk about Sama, who is a being who, to me, reminds me a lot of Wave Rider from DC. It's like a mixture of Wave Rider and the Silver Surfer. But he wanted to know the history of everything, the history of the cosmos, the history of where God came from. And so in this interpretation, God is a character named Arafosfi. Jacob, if I mispronounce any of this, I apologize in advance, and I apologize profusely. But I believe it's Arafosfi. And Arafosfi is the Alpha and the Omega in this story. He is the one who goes and creates 4 elders, we'll call them. And he creates those elders, Monolix, Zorain, the Sentinel, and the Starfather. And they each had personality of emotions. The Sentinel represents chaos, death, and strength. The Starfather was from comprehending their reality and their purpose. He represents order, time, and wisdom. And the other two, Monolix and Zoran. Zoran is represents the entire emotional spectrum, and Monolix represents life and creation. So they all were aspects of this one great God that created them all. And I'm not going to do a deep dive into this, but I want to say, and Jake, you're not going to believe this probably no longer than I've known you, but I want to say he's doing the same exposition-y thing that Ram V is doing on the New Gods, and I absolutely hated it. But what he's doing here is that same exposition, and I love it. I really do. I got into the characters of the Sentinel and Monolith and all of the rest, and it's a generational story. It shows the flaws in humanity. It shows brother against brother. It shows all of these big emotions. In moments it's very simplistic, and in other moments it rivals the depth of a Grant Morrison or an Alan Moore. And I don't say that easily, but it really does, because you see all of these different names, all of these different generational characters that he's built a timeline. Then it shows that a character called Damon, or Demon, however you want to pronounce it, and then Sander is from a peaceful tribe as opposed to Damon or Diamond. And he's trying to bring forth all of the evil and teach it to others. And Sander sees the beauty and keeps it to himself. And so you get this beautiful, it's like a 60-page book. This thing is huge. But you get the Great Father who rises up against Damon to try to bring peace to the universe after Damon pretty much becomes the ultimate evil. He starts swallowing planets in a Galactus-like fashion, absorbing their energy into himself. So you get to see these characters grow, prosper, die, be reborn. This thing is massive in scale and in scope. Just crazy massive in scale. And like I said, I liked some of the exposition-y stuff that Ram V was doing with New Gods, but I didn't like it enough to keep on with it, because the way it was presented there, it was so dense and so boring. It's kind of like the difference between reading a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls and trying to study that all on your own and come to your own conclusions about what's right and what's wrong, and how does this contradict what has come before. How does this passage in this on page 341, scroll 72, how does this directly contradict Matthew 14 in the New Testament? And that's just an example. Of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls were written at a time where only the Old Testament would have been extant, from what I remember. I studied that stuff extensively in my 20s, but this is not like that. This instead, it doesn't baby you. It doesn't bite-size feed you this. Instead, it gives you a full story. It gives you the story of creation. And in the end, you have a better understanding of these characters, their motivations, why they were born, why they were created at all, why there is any creator. You come to understand these things. And a lot of the anger and a lot of the frustration that comes through life in this current world comes from not understanding, from being frustrated, from being upset, from trying to wrap your head around things that make no sense. Why is there so much violence in the world? Why are people so angry? Why do all these things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? You know, why did my grandmother die? You know, why couldn't she have lived for another 5 years? Those kind of questions. And even though this book is not biblical canon, it is not, preached by any church. It's a story that is well worth your time, well worth reading. The book just sings. It really does. Between the writing and the artwork, the symbiosis between the two. To be honest, I've been speaking to Jake about possibly helping me get my own comic book off the ground, the one that I've mentioned to you before. And that's a possibility. I'm going to talk to him more after reading this. I'm even more interested to see what his thoughts would be on the characters that I have created and how he could help bring that world to life. Because I would love to see that. I would love to see somebody who does this for the love of the characters as much as anything else. They just want to see things come to fruition. They want to see things be born, things die, resurrect, come back with a volume 2. And it seems to me, after reading this book, that Jake Bostain has got that type of fire within him. He's got that type of understanding about what type of story he wants to tell. And if you haven't had a chance to check this out, I would hit him up on Instagram and see how you could get a copy of this book for yourself. And I would definitely say that this is, upon initial assessment, this is a really, really fun, independent, strong title that I would love to see more from the world of these characters and more of this history. Like I said, it's Rom v. exposition without the exposition. You're getting all of this history. You're getting all of this all crammed into this really short book, if you think about it, with all of these worlds and characters, all of them together. So if you get a chance, check him out. I'll show you again. It's Jake_Bostain on Instagram. Check Jake out. Give him a read. Let him know that you're interested in getting a copy of this book, and then give it a read. And come back here and let me know what you guys thought about this book. Because to me, I think it was amazing. And I can't wait to see some more work from Jake. Awesome job, my friend. Awesome job. And I look forward to talking to you about my creation, and perhaps we can create something along this epic scale working together. Thanks for joining me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed this book, and I'll catch you next time.